Hey third graders, it is Monday, April 13th, 2020, and today we are continuing with our new fairy tale unit. Today our I can learn about a fairy tale main character by observing what he or she says and does. Remember back in our character studies unit, we took a look at Opal and we noticed what Opal said and did, so that helped us get to know Opal better, and it gave us some ideas for possible character traits, how Opal acted over time. We can do the same thing with fairy tale characters, and that's what we're going to do today. Actually, today we're going to take a look at another version of Cinderella, and this is called Princess Furball. Okay, kind of an interesting name, isn't it? So sit back, relax, and what we're going to do is we're going to notice things that Princess Furball says and does. And then today for your assignment in Google Classroom, I am going to have you add on to a chart that I will have started for you. And the chart has two parts. The chart has a T-chart that asks you to fill in one or more, if you would like, things that Princess Furball says and does in the story. Again, I've started the chart for you. All you have to do is add on one thing for what she says and what she does. If you want to do more, that is a may do, that's optional for you, and that would be great if you want to add more things. Down at the bottom of the page is an area for you to fill in possible character traits. And all I am asking is for one trait about Princess Furball. I've again started some traits for you. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy the story, Princess Furball. Now, in this story, the story says it's retold. Remember, boys and girls, that we talked about fairy tales and how as they were passed down from generation to generation, the story was retold again and again by the elders in a family or a tribe or a village. So we don't know who the original author of this story is, but at some point, somebody wrote this fairy tale down. All right, let's take a look. Princess Furball. Now, interestingly, Princess Furball is another version of the tale Cinderella. Princess Furball comes from another country. So let's take a look. Here we go. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful young princess whose hair was the color of pure gold. She was frequently lonely and unhappy, for her mother had died when she was a baby, and her father paid little attention to her. Luckily, her old nurse, who loved the princess as much as a mother loves a daughter, saw that she was lonely and allowed her to run and play with the village children. And some days the princess visited with the cook in the large kitchen and learned to make soup and bread and cakes. Yet the nurse never forgot that the young girl was a princess. She taught her the manners of a young lady and arranged for tutors to instruct her in reading, writing, and dancing. And so the princess grew to be strong and capable and clever, besides being beautiful. And here's an illustration of how beautiful Princess Furball is. One day, the old nurse died, and the princess felt all alone again. To make matters worse, her father promised her hand in marriage to an ogre who appeared to give the king 50 50 wagons of silver in return. The princess was horrified when she heard what her father had done and begged him to change his mind, but her father was determined to carry out his bargain. The princess then thought of a clever plan. "Father," she said, "before I marry, I must have 3 bridal gifts. One dress as golden as the sun, another as silvery as the moon, and a third as glittering as the stars. In addition, I shall need a coat made of 1,000 different kinds of fur, one piece from every animal in your kingdom." There, she thought, my father will never be able to meet these demands. So notice, boys and girls, how she wanted 3 gifts, right? And notice also that she is going to be married to an ogre, okay? And again, in fairy tales, we have royalty. Remember our elements lesson last week of a fairy tale? I knew you would remember. The king, however, began at once to provide her for her bridal gifts. He called for the most skillful weavers in the land and ordered them to weave 3 dresses, one as golden as the sun, another as silvery as the moon, and a third as glittering as the stars. He commanded his hunters to go into the forest, kill 1,000 different kinds of wild animals, and bring home their skins so that the coat could be made. At last, when all the gifts were ready, the king laid them out for his daughter to see and said, "Tomorrow your marriage will take place." The poor princess decided the only thing to do was run away. That night, when all the castle was asleep, the princess got up. She folded the sun, the moon, and the star dresses into a package so small that it could fit into a walnut shell. So that'd be about that big. Then she took 3 tiny treasures that had belonged to her mother, a gold ring, a gold thimble, and a gold spinning wheel. These she put into a second walnut shell. Into a third shell, she put her favorite seasoning for the soup the cook had taught her to make. Then she bound up her hair, put on her boots and her coat of 1,000 furs, and stepped out into the snowy darkness. She walked all night. So you can see her, she's getting ready. And then you can see her going into the nighttime. And notice how she had 3 walnut-sized packages. At dawn, the princess came to a thick forest. She was very tired. The snow had covered her footprints, so she knew she could safely stop and rest. She found a hollow tree, curled up in it, and fell asleep. The sun rose higher and higher, but the princess slept on until it was nearly noon. On this very day, the young king, to whom the woods belonged, was out hunting in the forest. His hounds came to the tree where the princess slept, and they began to sniff and run around and around, barking excitedly. The king called to his hunters and said, "Go see what is hiding in that tree." There she is, sleeping. Two hunters went over to look. When they came back, they told the king that they had found a marvelous creature sound asleep in the hollow of a tree. "Its body is covered with 1,000 different kinds of fur," they said. "See if you can capture it alive," said the king. "Then tie it up, put it in a wagon, and bring it to the castle." When the hunters grabbed the princess, she awoke in terror and cried out, "Please don't hurt me. I have no home. Have pity on me and take me with you." "Well," they said, "come along, little fur ball. We'll take you to the cook. Perhaps he can find something useful for you to do. You can at least sweep up the ashes for him." The hunters put Furball into the wagon and drove her to the king's castle. There they showed her an old wood shed where daylight never entered. "Furball, you may live and sleep here," they said. Then they took her to the kitchen where the cook had her fetch the wood, draw the water, stir the fire, pluck the chickens, clean the vegetables, wash the dishes, sweep the ashes, and do all the rest of the dirty work that no one else wanted to do. Poor Furball lived for a long time as a servant to the servants. That means she was even below the servants. She could not see how her life would ever change. Here she is, working hard. One day, Furball heard that the king was giving a ball at the castle. "Please," she said to the cook, "may I go for a little while to see the guests arrive? I promise you that no one will catch even a glimpse of me." "Go," said the gruff old cook, "but be back in half an hour to sweep up the ashes and put the kitchen in order." Furball quickly took her smoky oil lamp and darted to her little woodshed. She washed the soot and ashes from her face and hands and undid her hair. Then she opened the first walnut shell and took out the dress that was as golden as the sun. Its glow lit up the whole woodshed. As soon as the princess was ready, she slipped around to the front of the castle and entered the great door as a guest. No one recognized her as Furball, the cinder maid of the kitchen. The doorkeepers thought she was a princess from some other country, and they bowed as she entered. They quickly told the king of her arrival, and he hastened to greet the princess and lead her out to dance. There she is in the first dress, as golden as the sun. "Never have I seen anyone so beautiful and charming," he thought to himself as they danced. When the music stopped, the Sun Princess curtsied to the king and smiled at him so brightly that his eyes were dazzled. Before he knew what had happened, she seemed to vanish. The guard at the castle gate was called and questioned, but he had seen no one pass. The princess ran like a sunbeam to her dark shed. She took off her gleaming dress, put on her fur coat, smudged her face and hands with soot, and was once again Furball. When she entered the kitchen and reached for the broom to sweep up the ashes, the cook said, "Let that go until tomorrow. I want you to make some soup for the king so that I have a chance to see the visitors at the ball. But do not let one of your hairs drop into the soup or you will get nothing to eat for a week." While making the king's soup, Furball opened the nutshell that contained the special herbs and sprinkled some into the soup pot. When the soup was ready, she poured it into the king's bowl. Then she took her mother's gold ring from the other nutshell and quietly dropped it into the bowl. After the ball was over, the king called for his supper and declared he had never tasted better soup in his life. But when the bowl was nearly empty, he discovered to his surprise the small gold ring at the bottom. He could not imagine how it got there and ordered the cook to appear before him. The old cook was terribly frightened. "You must have let a hair fall into the soup," he growled at Furball. "If you have, I shall give you a good beating and nothing to eat for a week." As soon as the cook came into the banquet hall, the king demanded, "Who made this soup?" I made it, sir," faltered the cook. "That is not true," said the king. "This soup is much better than any soup you have ever made." Then the cook had to confess that Furball had made the soup. "Send her to me," commanded the king. So there he is. Yum, yum, yum soup, right? And now he's demanding to see Furball. In no time, Furball appeared, all covered with soot and stains. The king looked at her and said, "Who are you, and how did you learn to make such good soup?" "I am a stranger in your kingdom, sir. I once worked in the kitchen of another castle where I learned to make soup." "What do you know about this ring which I found in my soup?" the king asked, but Furball only looked at him and would not answer. When the king found he could learn nothing from her, he sent Furball away. Some time later, there was another ball at the castle. Again, Furball asked the cook if she could go and watch the guests arrive. "Go," he grunted, "but be sure to be back in 1/2 hour so I can make the king that soup, or to make the king that soup that he is so fond of." Furball promised to be back in a half an hour and ran quickly to her little shed. There she washed off the stains and the soot from her face and hands and let down her hair. Then she took her dress as silvery as the moon out of the walnut shell and put it on. Again the shed shone with the light of her dress. She appeared at the castle door as a foreign princess, just as she had done before. Only this time the king was waiting for her. He was so glad to see her that he would dance with no one else. But at the end of the half hour, the princess curtsied and vanished as quickly as she had before. Like a moonbeam, she slipped around the castle and back down to her little shed, where she made herself once again into the sooty little fur ball. Then she returned to the kitchen to make the king's soup. This time, after adding the special herbs, Furball dropped the tiny golden thimble into the king's bowl. The king ate the soup with great relish, but was amazed to find the gold thimble at the bottom of the bowl. Again, he sent for the cook and asked him if he had made the soup, and again the cook confessed that it was Furball. She was ordered to appear before the king, but when he asked her about the gold thimble, she only looked at him and would not say a word. At the king's third ball, everything happened as before. Third time, right, boys and girls? The cook told Furball that she might go and see the guests arrive, but be sure you are back in time to make the soup the king thinks is better than mine, he growled. Furball did not stop to listen, but ran quickly to her shed, washed off the stains in the soot, combed her golden hair, and put on the dress that glittered like the stars. When the king stepped forward to receive her at the ball, as he had done twice before, he thought her quite the most beautiful maiden in the world. He knew that he had fallen in love with her. Oh. While they were dancing, he slipped the tiny gold ring onto her finger. The king had asked the musicians to play the longest dance they knew, but the minute the music stopped, the princess smiled at him and was gone like a shooting star. The princess was out of breath when she reached the shed and knew she had overstayed her time. She quickly tied a scarf around her hair, threw the fur coat over her star dress, and began to put soot and ashes on her face and hands. When she reached the kitchen, she made the king's soup with its special seasoning and then dropped the tiny gold spinning wheel into the bowl. So it's the third time, third dress, third bowl of soup, and third little item that she's thrown in that bowl, right, boys and girls? When she found the gold spinning wheel at the bottom of the bowl, the king sent for Furball. This time she entered, and he looked at her hand, and there was a small gold ring, which she had not had the time to take off. The king caught Furball by the hand, and while she struggled to get free, the coat fell open and he saw the star dress. The king drew off Furball's coat of 1,000 furs, and as he did so, her scarf came off and her golden hair fell all over her shoulders. Furball wiped the soot from her face and hands with her scarf and stood before the king as the most radiant princess on earth. The king told the princess he loved her and asked her to marry him. You have the beauty of the sun, the moon, and the stars. You are as clever as you are lovely, he said. I cannot live without you. Then the princess told the king her story, and he loved her even more than before. The wedding took place the next day. Everyone who had attended the balls came to see the marriage of Furball and the king. The cook, who made better pastries than soup, stayed up all night baking an enormous cake for the bridal couple. And there's the cake. And there's the couple. They're looking pretty good. And the king and queen lived happily ever after. Well, boys and girls, now that you've heard the story of Princess Furball, I'd like you to go to Google Classroom again, and I'd like you to find your chart on what a character says and does in a fairy tale, and make sure you fill that out for me. Today, for your independent reading, please continue to read fairy tales and folk tales. You can use the document that I posted last week to find tales if you have some at home that's great. You can use Raz Kids, Sora. Definitely in your Raz Kids reading room, there's a list that Mrs. Hop and I made of fairy tales that you can find in your reading room for Raz Kids. Please try to read at least one today. That would be great for part of your 30 minutes of reading. Have a great day, boys and girls. See you tomorrow.